The story places us at the moment when a girl mocks the one who will become our protagonist. She makes it clear how pathetic he is, even saying that if it were up to her, she wouldn't have even wanted to be his childhood friend. At that moment, it sounded as if something inside our protagonist had broken. But going back a bit before that happened, we're told that the girl's name is Rua, and she's far from normal by any standard. She is a popular idol, and her family owns a powerful organization with unmatched economic and political influence. Because of this, she's often seen as a fairy tale princess. On the other hand, we have our protagonist, Kazuma, who sees himself as a dull and gloomy boy, incapable of making friends, let alone having a girlfriend. However, in his childhood, he made one friend who completely changed his life, none other than Rua. By coincidence, they never drifted apart, and this led Kazuma to become her most loyal companion, living his life in Rua's shadow. As time went on, he kept telling himself that he didn't need to be special like Rua always made him feel. What Kazuma truly wanted was to make friends and get a girlfriend like a normal person. He even told Rua this once, to which she replied that he should know his place and appreciate the opportunity she gave him, because if he weren't her childhood friend, he'd still be a nobody. Years went by, and in high school, Kazuma was still Rua's pet. It's worth mentioning some unusual scars across his body. Without dwelling on it too much, one day he receives an unexpected message from a classmate inviting him to a group outing. Somehow, this girl knows that Kazuma wants to make friends and get a girlfriend. Despite barely having interacted with her before, Kazuma tells himself that if he truly wants to change, he must take the first step bravely to reach the perfect life he dreams of. So he goes to a hair salon and buys new clothes, trying to bring out the best version of himself. With that done, the time comes to go to the meeting point, a karaoke place. But as he opens the door to the room where everyone is gathered, he is met with laughter. Unexpectedly, Rua appears and encourages everyone to mock him, then comments on how pathetic his attempt to change his appearance is. Seeing all this, Kazuma finally realizes that it was all planned by Rua just to humiliate him again. But when he doesn't react the way she expected, she approaches him and asks why he's just standing there, adding that if he's acting like that, it must be because he's about to cry. Kazuma then asks her if he's done something to deserve being treated that way. Rua doesn't hesitate to say it's because he's her pet, so he's supposed to make her laugh through his shame. As if that weren't enough, she confesses that if it were up to her, the very fact that he's her childhood friend is something that bothers her. Upon hearing those words, something inside Kazuma finally shatters. Returning to the crucial moment in the story, Kazuma tells her that if that's how she feels, then it's best they end the friendship they've had for so long. Those words make everyone laugh. After all, what's the point of taking that so seriously? But for Rua, it's like a bucket of cold water. She immediately tries to change his mind, insisting that he has no right to say such a thing, and that unlike her, he doesn't have the freedom to hate her. But Kazuma no longer cares. With a firm gesture, he leaves money to cover his share and walks away, leaving Rua in shock. Even though the others tell her not to worry about a guy like that, after all, it's not like he was anything special. At that moment, the girl who had invited the protagonist notices something strange. The table that was previously in good condition is now broken, and the most damaged area is the spot where the protagonist had left the money. However, some people begin to say it was already like that, as they don't believe that guy could be responsible. And without giving it more importance, they continue with their gathering. When they try to get Rue to liven up the mood, she, with an indifferent personality, becomes completely apathetic, focusing solely on the fact that she won't forgive Kazuma for doing that to her. As for Kazuma, the protagonist, he feels as if a weight has been lifted from his shoulders. Reflecting on some past incidents, he tells himself that starting today, he no longer needs to live in her shadow, revealing that he once served as a kind of guardian for Rua, but that's now in the past. He wants to be free and no longer dependent on her. Continuing, we move on to the evening of that same day, where we see Rua's grandfather, who is the president of a certain organization and also the director of the academy where Rua and the protagonist study. At that moment, Rua bursts into the room. much to her grandfather's delight due to the unexpected visit. But this is also when another person is introduced, Ryua's cousin, Sakura. Despite the important matters being discussed, Ryua brings up that Kazuma did something horrible to her. He told her that they should end their friendship. This is apparently the first time he has ever acted that way toward her. Sakura suspects that perhaps Ryua did something truly awful to make Kazuma react like that. But Ryua clarifies that it wasn't anything that bad. She merely reaffirmed that he's her pet and also said that being her childhood friend is annoying to her. Upon hearing that, both Sakura and the grandfather think it's understandable that Kazuma got angry. Ryua then insists she wasn't being serious, she was just a little upset because ever since they started high school, Kazuma hasn't stopped saying that he wants to make friends and get a girlfriend. To them, this seems like perfectly normal behavior coming from him, but Ryua refuses to accept it. Raising her voice, she declares that she's the prettiest girl in the world, and therefore, Kazuma should settle for just her and not be with other girls, because after all, she's the only one in the world who understands him, and even knows that he loves her. And based on that, she says that she loves him too. After this declaration, her doting grandfather immediately takes Ryua's side, and as always, the protagonist ends up being blamed for everything. However, Sakura points out that if Ryua really wants to fix things, she should at least talk to Kazuma and be honest about her true feelings, otherwise, she'll just keep pushing him further away. She's even at risk of never returning to their usual relationship. But Ryua refuses to change her mind and insists that she'll be the one to fix things. We also learn that Sakura is actually the protagonist's teacher, which further ties him to Ryua's family. Knowing this, Ryua asks Sakura to convince him to apologize, and if that weren't enough, she wants Sakura to force him to somehow confess to her, as she's tired of just being his friend. In response, Sakura asks her grandfather if he wants Kazuma to become Ryua's husband, to which he enthusiastically agrees. After all, he sent Kazuma to be with her to teach him martial arts and other disciplines in preparation to eventually hand over leadership of the organization. That's how we learn that the protagonist hides a background not many people know about. From a very young age, he has always stayed in the shadows of Ryua, as part of his assigned task, never standing out in order to maintain a low profile. However, Sakura knows that if he ever decided to take things seriously, the protagonist would be someone incredibly successful, and would attract attention in everything he does. She even mentions that, despite keeping a low profile, he has won the hearts of some girls, but he always ends up ignoring them. With all that explained, Ryua and her grandfather are in complete agreement that Kazuma is the one chosen to carry on the family's legacy. However, Sakura reminds them that they still need to fix the small problem Ryua caused. By now, it's possible that Kazuma has decided to leave them behind. Because of that, he may no longer feel the need to suppress his power, which could lead to serious problems not just in sports and academics, but also in love. Moving on to the next morning, Ryua hasn't changed her unpleasant attitude toward Kazuma at all. She even places a mocking sign on his desk, and now our protagonist must face the consequences of having defied her. After all, within the academy, she holds power over everyone, especially since her grandfather is the director. This marks the first obstacle Kazuma must overcome if he hopes to live a normal life. Given the choice to take down the sign and continue with class, he chooses instead to write on it, agreeing with her and stating that from now on, he'll do everything on his own. When break time comes, Kazuma wants to avoid drawing attention to himself so Ryua doesn't find him. So, he chooses to go to the school's conveniently located underground storage room, deciding it will be his safe haven since neither students nor teachers go there. But when he opens the door to the storage room, he unexpectedly finds a girl who, at that very moment, is in the middle of changing clothes. Naturally, upon seeing Kazuma, she screams at the shocking encounter, marking the beginning of days that will no longer be peaceful for him. Meanwhile, back with Ryua, she presents herself to the public as an idol well known by many. She goes on to post on a popular platform about something that's been bothering her lately. A few days ago, she went to karaoke with some classmates, just girls, but among them was one killjoy who spent the whole time looking downcast. Then, out of nowhere, that person said they were leaving, even though they had just arrived. That sudden action completely ruined the mood. Sharing this with her followers, Rua gives them advice: don't act that way, and try to put yourself in other people's shoes so that everyone can have a good time when they're with you. Changing topics, Rua announces exciting news. She's been given a new job where she'll debut in a group alongside a new voice actress named Manhwa. She adds that Amain is in the same talent agency and even attends the same school. After updating her fans, Rua finishes by saying the debut event will be in 2 weeks and signs off. We then see a wave of supportive comments, with many also agreeing that she had every right to be upset with that person. If it wasn't already clear, the person Rua was talking about in her story was Kazuma, the protagonist. She's clearly trying to justify that getting mad at him was the right thing to do. Now returning to the more important matter, we go back to the moment Kazuma entered the underground storage room, where he believed no one would be. But to his surprise, he encountered a girl who, at that moment, was changing clothes. Standing outside, he apologizes to her and takes the opportunity to introduce himself. The girl then tells him her name, and we find out that she is Manhwa, who we'll now refer to as Amain. Once she finishes changing, she allows Kazuma to come in. He still can't stop thinking about how he's not the only one who knows about this quiet place. But setting that aside, Kazuma has another question, and this time, without holding back, he asks Amain why she was changing clothes there instead of using the dressing room. Faced with that, she, very nervous, responds that she was actually looking for a place to practice singing and dancing, because she has a live event coming up. So, remembering that this place existed, she prepared everything in order to rehearse. Additionally, she goes on to tell the protagonist that she is a voice actress. Upon hearing that, Kazuma explains that at that academy, there are several people who are artists, including his childhood friend, and they are all considered outstanding students. Knowing this, he feels a bit puzzled, as she could have used another place to practice instead of this improvised spot. After all, at that school, those students have more privileges to use dedicated spaces where they can perform. However, Amain, somewhat insecurely, begins to tell him that when she arrived at school that morning, her desk had been moved to the hallway, where a note was placed that said there was no place for her. From this, we see that Amain is not treated well in that place. That's why, when the protagonist found her, she had a sad expression, on the verge of tears. He then asks her why she's being bullied if she's an outstanding student, but Amain clarifies that it has nothing to do with that. She explains that even though she calls herself a seiyuu, she's not famous, neither for her face nor her voice. However, Kazuma disagrees with that statement, complimenting her by saying he finds her voice quite lovely, comparing it to the sound of a little bell, a pleasant and easily recognizable voice. Realizing the sincerity in his words, Amain blushes deeply, but, true to her insecure nature, insists he's exaggerating, saying she can't compare with professional voices. She even mentions that compared to the popular Rua, she is nothing, and at the mention of Rua, Amain visibly becomes more downcast. She then says that recently, she was paired with Rua. She believes that's when the mistreatment began, as she constantly receives messages on social media saying she's not good enough to perform alongside Rua, and that she'll ruin Rua's image. This doesn't surprise Kazuma, as Rua's fans behave just like she does. That's when the protagonist asks how she ended up being paired with that pig, but the derogatory nickname upsets Amain, as she warns him that if someone hears that, it could be the end for both of them. Still, the protagonist doesn't care in the slightest and proceeds to calm her down. Amain then explains that it was her agency's decision, as they found the pairing interesting. However, this deeply affected her, and she hasn't stopped comparing herself to Rua. She sees herself as too ordinary and gloomy and believes she can only ever play a supporting role beside her. Upon hearing this, Kazuma thinks Amain is being too hard on herself, though something about all this feels suspicious. The agency backing her is connected to the organization run by Rua's grandfather, and knowing that, it's no surprise they'd support their favorite. Even so, the protagonist still wonders why the agency would pair Rua with someone who is just beginning to stand out. He suspects there might be a plot to make Rua shine even more by making Amain look worse. But suddenly, at that moment, Amain says that even if she has to play a secondary role, she is willing to make the most of the opportunity. At the very least, she doesn't want to be a burden, so she'll give it her all. As she vents to Kazuma, he sees the determination in her and decides to help her practice, even if he can only offer opinions from a beginner's perspective. He also thinks to himself that this will be a good chance to avoid being found. Amane bursts with joy upon realizing that at least someone supports her in that place. With a smile, she tells the protagonist that from now on, she's counting on him. In response to Amane's gesture, the protagonist can't help but compare her sweet demeanor with the miserable time he has spent with Rua. And speaking of her, Kazuma receives several messages from Rua asking if he saw the video she made, since all her fans are supporting her and saying he was incredibly insensitive for treating her that way. She adds that maybe in her next video she should mention his name so that all her fans start harassing him. She demands that he come to her quickly if he doesn't want that to happen, and even says she's willing to forgive him if he kneels before her. But upon reading those messages, the protagonist refuses to be manipulated into crawling back to her, so the best thing he does is block her. That way, he doesn't have to worry about her nonsense anymore. Later, during the next break, Kazuma goes to meet up with Amane, even bringing her a bottle of water to continue rehearsing. However, at that moment, he runs into Rua, who demands to know where he's been all this time. Kazuma pays her absolutely no attention, but she insists on knowing why he's treating her like that and why he blocked her. After all, no one should ever do such things to her. Seeing that he doesn't say a single word, Rua convinces herself that maybe it's because he finally realized how beautiful she is and is now too nervous to even look at her. But fed up with hearing her voice, the protagonist walks away as quickly as possible, leaving her talking to no one. As he does so, Rua's followers stop him and demand to know why he's ignoring her, saying it's disrespectful. That's when the protagonist sizes up the situation and notices that the one who stopped him is the future star of the baseball club. He wonders why this guy doesn't have anything better to do than stick to Rua. Shouldn't he be spending his time training instead? Without even saying a word to him, the guy takes it personally and throws a punch at the protagonist. However, Kazuma dodges it in a single move, swiftly positioning himself behind the attacker with a hostile aura, causing the guy to feel genuine fear. At that point, the protagonist calmly tells him that he needs more training. Infuriated, the guy tries to strike again, but this time, Rua stops him. She says that she is the only one allowed to bother Kazuma, and that the only condition under which others can harass him is if she gives the order, which she hasn't. So she warns the guy not to get involved, or there will be consequences. That ends the scene, and the protagonist finally speaks to Rua. She becomes overly excited, believing he's finally forgiven her. But Kazuma can already see how smug she's become just for that small interaction. That's when he makes it clear, the person who once allowed her to bully or even stalk him no longer exists. He won't let himself be manipulated or made to feel inferior by anyone, not by her, or by anyone else, so he asks her not to bother him anymore. With that, he says goodbye, leaving Rua shocked. And even though we see her hurt by his words, the truth is that she's enjoying how cool Kazuma looked. Her love for him only grows stronger. After that incident, a week passes. During this time, the protagonist and Amane have developed a better understanding of each other. Thanks to Kazuma's support, Amane has started to develop certain feelings for him, and she doesn't miss the opportunity to tell him how amazing he is. In such a short time, he's helped her improve her movements. Those words of gratitude don't go unnoticed by Kazuma, especially since this is the first time someone has ever thanked him for something he's done. Though he doesn't feel like he's done anything extraordinary to deserve it. Still, with more work to be done for Amane's dance performance, Kazuma notices her slightly hunched posture. Taking advantage of the moment, he suggests she try imitating a cat to stand out more in her choreography. And just as Kazuma suspected, he found a weapon of mass destruction that wins you over with its adorableness. Seeing the path clearly, Amane realizes she can take on the role of that character to stand out within the group. The protagonist, already excited, was about to ask for a costume to be designed in line with that idea, and at first Amane agrees. However, she suddenly changes her mind, having realized that the agency wants to make Rua the standout, and what they proposed wouldn't suit her. On top of that, it would steal the spotlight, while Amain is only meant to play a supporting role. Upon hearing this, the protagonist doesn't share her opinion, but he has no choice but to go along with Amain. Seeing him dejected, she tells him that singing and dancing were never her main profession anyway, and what she really wants is for him to watch her act, because she's an actress. She adds that her dream is to portray an anime character, and in order to achieve that dream, she'll do all the work ahead of her to build more connections and take one step closer to becoming a professional. So, he shouldn't feel down just because she won't stand out at that event. Hearing such an aspiration, the protagonist sees how optimistic Amain is and how much she loves her craft, which makes Kazuma feel envious of her. Yet, without revealing his own toxic tendencies, he tells her he has no dreams or goals, because he truly doesn't have any. That's when Amain asks him if there's nothing he would like to do. Somewhat discouraged and unsure, the protagonist finds the confidence to confess that what he would really like is to be a normal person, someone he can be proud of. Expecting her to laugh like Rua did, Amain instead offers him her full support, certain that he can achieve that and anything he sets his mind to. This makes Kazuma smile and thank her, and this in turn leads Amain to bring up a topic she's been avoiding. She's heard rumors that Rua and the protagonist had a fight recently, and she's worried it might be because of her. Kazuma clears up the misunderstanding, explaining that it's not about that, and goes on to say that he and Rua are no longer childhood friends. He'd rather not know anything about her anymore. Hearing this, Amain feels both relieved and a bit anxious, but now that her concern is resolved, she starts addressing the protagonist by his first name, Kazuma, since until then she had only called him by his last name. She then wants to ask him something very important, beginning with, "Do you want to be my?" But before she can finish, Rua shows up, completely ruining the moment, revealing that she had been investigating the protagonist all week and discovered that location. Acting like a jealous girlfriend, she demands to know what that homewrecker cat is doing with her beloved Kazuma. Rua then stands in front of Kazuma and says she came to see him because he never came to her. But now that she finally understands the reason behind his behavior, she immediately unleashes a barrage of insults at Amain. She's realized that her beloved Kazuma disappears after class just to meet with this girl, and that's why she can't understand why he would cheat on her with someone so gloomy and lacking even a speck of beauty. Seeing them so close together, her envy quickly boils over, and in a fit of rage, she screams that she shouldn't have to go through this. Kazuma belongs to her and no one else. She demands to know why he's not on her side, but our protagonist chooses not to explain, deciding it's better not to play along. On the other hand, Amain is worried about what might happen, knowing the connections Rua has. So, in an attempt to defuse the situation, she begins to blame herself, since after all, she was the one who asked Kazuma to accompany her during her practice session. But as soon as she says it, Rua lunges at her with a movement as fast as it is unexpected, because Amain made the mistake of calling the protagonist by his first name. That's why, with a face full of jealousy and fury, Rua demands to know what she just said. Amain tries to fix her mistake, but it's already too late. Consumed by jealousy, Rua doesn't hold back and ruthlessly puts Amain in her place, telling her she'll never get close to Kazuma. Annoyed by the bangs covering Amain's face, she forcefully brushes them aside, wanting Kazuma to clearly see how unattractive she is. But to her surprise, beneath those bangs and her shy demeanor, Amain was hiding a kind of sweetness that could make anyone fall for her. At that moment, Rua felt fear creeping in, and not just any fear. It was the panic of imagining that Kazuma might have fallen for Amain. That's why she was already about to take it out on her, if it weren't for the protagonist, already fed up with her tantrum, stopping her and asking if she wasn't supposed to form a group with Amain. Rua replies that she is, but only to use her as background to make herself stand out more. Hearing that, Kazuma tells her that Amain is working really hard to fulfill her role, so he asks Rua not to get in the way and to leave. But once again, Rua objects and demands to know why he keeps taking that girl's side. Wouldn't it be better if he stood with his childhood friend? However, the protagonist makes it clear, he'll only support those who are making an effort. He also makes it perfectly clear that he and Rua are no longer anything. reminding her of what happened last time at the karaoke. This leaves Rua speechless for a moment, but after recovering, she asks if he's still mad, trying to play it off as just a game and attempting to make peace. But Kazuma isn't going to fall for Rua's empty words. Confronting her, he asks if she even realizes how many people she's hurt with that game of hers. Stepping closer, he tells her to stop thinking the world revolves around her. It's time she learned her place. With those words hanging in the air, Rua is visibly shaken. Taking advantage of that, Kazuma asks Amain to leave with him. But before they can walk away, Rua snaps back, warning him that he made a mistake by not choosing her. Still unwilling to give up, she declares that she won't lose to some second-rate voice actress like Amain. Once outside the school, Amain can't stop apologizing, but Kazuma calms her down and says that what just happened actually gave him an idea. Wanting Rua to finally leave them alone, he believes that if they play on her inflated pride, they can teach her a lesson she'll never forget. We then see them at a restaurant, where Kazuma hands Amain a pair of cat ears he just bought. He immediately asks if she has a channel where she uploads videos, because he thought she could wear them while dancing that adorable choreography she did the other day. Amain doesn't quite understand this sudden proposal, especially since she has very few subscribers, but the protagonist tells her not to worry, he'll help her, because this is all part of his plan. He then asks her to lift her bangs when they record, and without warning, he tells her that she's very cute, saying it's a shame she hides her face. Hearing those words, Amain blushes deeply, confessing that she's afraid of people looking at her, which is why she covers her face, even though she knows it's a bad habit. All she can do is apologize, as she's still not confident enough to overcome it. In response, the protagonist brings up the agency, wondering if they've ever said anything about her appearance, but Amain replies that they actually told her she looks better that way. The group they're forming is only meant to generate buzz and boost Rua's fame. After they record a single, the group will be disbanded. That's when Kazuma remarks on how dirty the entertainment industry can be. But Amain tries to soften that view, explaining that the agency basically belongs to Rua's grandfather, so it was to be expected that all the attention would go to her. And upon mentioning that, Amain begins to hesitate about going against someone like Rua, which the protagonist realizes stems from her deep lack of confidence, something she attributes to her environment. In this world, many fear losing their place and make sure to crush anyone who stands out. That's why it's clear that both at school and in showbiz, Amain was surrounded by people who didn't want her to shine. While thinking about that, Amain asks why he hates Rua so much if they've been childhood friends. It's also clear that she cares deeply for him, but the protagonist doesn't want to talk about it and brushes it off by saying she's only causing him trouble. Changing the subject, the protagonist notices that Amain has stopped calling him by his name, even though they had agreed on it. So he tells her that instead of using his last name, she should just call him Kazuma. Hearing that, she gets really happy and, without thinking much about what she's about to say, asks if she can call him Amain from now on. Without wasting any time, the protagonist agrees, leaving her completely stunned. But once she recovers, she's ready to give it her all in the video they're going to film as part of the plan. Now moving to the YouTube platform, we see Amain introducing herself to the audience, saying she'll be performing an original dance called the Amain Dance. And even though she doesn't have many subscribers, she kindly asks viewers to watch the video until the end. With a confident move, she begins the choreography she's practiced so diligently, casting a direct spell on the heart. Accompanied by her voice, her adorableness becomes purifying. At the end of her performance, with a face glowing with excitement, she announces that the song will be part of her group's long-awaited debut. She joyfully invites everyone to come see her this Sunday during such a special moment. And as any proper YouTuber would, she asks viewers to subscribe to her channel. And while they're at it, why not subscribe to this one too? Watching the video, Kazuma can only think about how cute Amain looked. But looking at the comments, even though there are few, he notices mixed reactions, since some of them come from Rua's fans, and that's the only reason that, despite not wanting to, he has to start his investigation. So he plays Rua's latest video, believing it's behind some of the hateful comments, and ends up witnessing Rua revealing her true self on camera. With unrestrained fury, she begins insulting the protagonist using names similar to his, trying not to make it obvious that she likes him. It becomes harder for her to keep up the lie. Her jealousy is so apparent, she even asks her audience why he didn't choose her. After venting, she quickly returns to her usual, perfect girl act, telling her viewers that what they just saw was nothing more than a rehearsal of her incredible acting skills, so there's no need to be surprised. She even says that she should become an actress, given how talented she is, and bids farewell to her audience that way. Once the video ends, Kazuma is frozen in front of the screen, wondering what the hell he just watched. But on the other hand, hearing how she insulted him without even trying to hide it, he doesn't take it as a random tantrum, but as a clear declaration of war. With that in mind, he decides he won't show any mercy when it's time to crush her. But he knows that to do so, he'll first have to deal with Rua's popularity. She gets thousands of views, and meanwhile, Amain's video barely scrapes 50 views. Despite its low reception, he knows that the video he filmed of Amain has enough potential to go viral because of how heartwarming it is, and if people just saw it, it would surely spread. So all he has to do is help her. And by making a post, it's revealed that our protagonist, despite being a quiet guy with no friends, is totally different online. It's mentioned that some time ago, hoping to practice his social skills and move toward a more normal life, he started interacting online, looking for a place where he could belong and feel less alone. This would lead, quite unexpectedly, to him becoming the sub-leader of a fairly large clan, having made some useful contacts along the way. With that in mind, we move forward a few days, where we see that Amain arrives to meet him, just as surprised as she is puzzled, because in only 3 days, the video she thought would flop suddenly went viral, so she asks Kazuma if he had anything to do with it. The protagonist replies, saying he helped spread it a little, but he clarifies that it was quite easy to make it stand out since it was all thanks to her talent. Those words make Amain blush because for the first time, she feels what it's like to have someone who believes in her. But that's not all. The positive comments she's been receiving have given her enough motivation to try to stand out in the group's upcoming performance, especially since even some people at school said they were planning to attend the event to see her. Speaking of which, we see that Rua has taken charge of promoting the performance all around the school, meaning many people there will come to watch them. With just a few days left, the time has come to set the next phase of the plan in motion. Now they have to wait for Rua to take the bait they left. And sure enough, it doesn't take long before Rua shows up at the storage room to interrupt them, wearing a pair of cat ears, because she saw Amain's video. As Kazuma expected, she completely fell into their trap, acting overly confident by emphasizing her cuteness with the accessory, showing that she now believes there's no way she can lose. So confident is she that, in a sudden outburst, Rua challenges Amain to make the event a cat ear battle, expecting the audience to decide who the cutest is. And it's precisely in that moment that everything makes sense. The real goal of the plan was for Amain to get up on stage wearing cat ears and dazzle everyone with her choreography. Therefore, Kazuma already knew how Rua would react after seeing the video go viral. After all, as her former childhood friend, he knows her perfectly. It's clear she's currently suppressing her frustration at having lost the spotlight. So, with everything prepared, it's time to begin the rebellion against Rua. On the long-awaited day of the event, Kazuma runs into Amain, surprisingly far from the dressing rooms. When he asks, she explains that Rua threw a tantrum with the manager, refusing to share the same space. As expected, they gave in to her demands, leaving Amain with an empty room that barely qualifies as a dressing room. But looking on the bright side, at least Rua won't bother them. Kazuma then encourages Amain, saying that as long as she performs the way she always does, everything will go well. He's seen her practicing all those days, and he asks her to believe in herself. His words make her want to ask why he's doing so much for her, since she doesn't feel like she deserves it. That's when Kazuma tells her he thinks school can be a bit suffocating with its preferential treatment toward top students. And while he knows this happens in many places, their school is blatantly elitist. That's why he believes that if Amain could achieve something without being part of that privileged group, it might break a hole in the system. though in truth, that wasn't his main reason. Without overthinking it, Kazuma admits that, seeing how hard she worked, he simply wanted to help her. There was no deeper reason. Then, pulling out a pair of cat ears, he tells her that he made them himself just for her. He had been looking for a style that would suit her, but after some searching, he thought it would be quicker to make them himself. Ame blushes at the sudden gift and promises to give it her all. Just then, Kazuma gently stops her and brushes aside her bangs, letting her face show completely, because he knows that, in that moment, no one will be able to outshine her. However, Ame still doesn't feel ready to show herself in that way. But that's when our protagonist tells her that he also tried to change his image, because the day he was invited to karaoke, he had the courage to go to the hair salon, and doing so made him feel as if he had been reborn. He thought that by changing his appearance, everyone would see him differently. But in his case, all he got was people pointing at him and laughing. Because of that experience, he can say with full certainty that Ame is different. She can shine brighter than anyone, because she has a big dream and has worked incredibly hard to achieve it. Just then, there's a knock at the door, announcing it's Ame's turn to go on stage. Kazuma, offering her his hand, gives her one final push of encouragement, telling her she shouldn't stay in Rua's shadow, because now that she's gained confidence, he's sure she'll win over all the fans. Motivated by those words that sparked her courage, Ame steps onto the stage, getting a little closer to the dream she's wished for so long. Meanwhile, Rua is already on stage, beginning her performance with a thank you to the audience. As expected, the crowd doesn't stop praising her, especially for the striking catgirl costume she's wearing. Hearing all those compliments, she can't help but feel even more superior to Ame, and letting a bit of arrogance show, she starts the debut of her group's song without delay. Although before she forgets, she introduces Ame to the audience, sure that she'll go unnoticed, just like she does at school. However, the moment Ame reveals the change she made by lifting her bangs and begins greeting everyone with a sweet and energetic voice, the crowd's reactions come quickly. Her cuteness immediately makes her stand out more than Rua, and realizing this hits the arrogant girl hard. She can't help but wonder why they're paying attention to that girl, who is supposed to be just a background extra. Still, Rua has a few tricks up her sleeve, because Rua knows that when it comes to singing and dancing, she's the best, thanks to all her experience. So without further delay, and wanting the whole audience to focus on her, she launches into the song and gives it everything she's got. But even so, as the track continues, more and more comments about Ame begin to arise. People start asking who she is and where she came from, because, honestly, the audience thinks she stands out more than Rua, both in voice and in dancing. While all this is happening, we see that Kazuma had already foreseen Rua's defeat. He explains that she thought she could win by turning this into a singing and dancing competition. But while Rua spent her time playing around, Ame was practicing day and night, even after classes, improving her dancing, which used to be her weak point, to such a degree that she had reached perfection, and her voice, already beautiful, was now able to shine freely, thanks to the confidence that our protagonist had given her. Thinking it over carefully, Kazuma realizes that the outcome of this battle was already decided the moment Rua began to envy Ame. By trying to imitate her and ride the wave of virality with the cat ears, Rua had walked straight into the trap they had set, choosing to confront Ame in the very field where she was strongest. And now, there's nothing she can do to change that. It was all as inevitable as the time she humiliated Kazuma during that karaoke outing. But amid those thoughts, Kazuma suddenly notices a new problem approaching. Among the audience, there are several men with tense expressions as they watch what's happening to Rua. Seeing them head toward the backstage area, where only authorized personnel are allowed, Kazuma doesn't hesitate for even a second and rushes over. A few minutes later, one of those men is shown trying to contact the others, but no one answers. Left with no other option, he mutters to himself that before the song ends, he needs to get that girl off the stage. However, without any prior warning, our protagonist was already waiting for him, immediately asking who he planned to take off the stage. But just then, the man paid more attention to his surroundings and realized that the boy had already taken care of all his companions. He then asked who the hell he was to have pulled off such a feat. But our protagonist didn't answer. He only wanted to know if the man was part of the Takweki family, which is Rua's family. And seeing that the man didn't respond, Kazuma revealed what he knew, saying he was aware that Amane had not actually played the role of support. Apparently, she had been ordered to sabotage the performance and make it fail in front of everyone. Surprised that Kazuma knew such confidential information, the man asked how he had found out. But having confirmed that his assumption was correct, Kazuma no longer needed to say anything. With a swift movement, he got behind the man and knocked him out instantly with a single blow. With disdain, he remarked that the Takweki family's subordinates were still second-rate, or worse, that the quality of their servants had deteriorated considerably compared to the time when he had been around. Having resolved that minor inconvenience, Kazuma still had time to witness the end of Amane's performance. It comforted him to know that nothing had ruined her big moment, and even if something had happened, he wouldn't have allowed it. As he looked around, he realized that even if something were to occur, the audience had already been captivated by Amane's voice, and now nothing could stop her. However, despite witnessing all that influence, our protagonist still had something important to do. Taking a deep breath, he raised his voice with all his strength to shout to Amane to give it her all. Hearing Kazuma's voice from within the crowd, she smiled and moved on to the final part of her song. Nua, realizing what Kazuma had just said, froze in panic. She made a wrong move and ended up falling in front of the entire audience. Thus, the great Princess Rua suffered a blow to her image with that incident. Nevertheless, the event turned out to be a great success. The next day, as expected, all the major entertainment media only published articles praising Rua's performance, and yet, nowhere was her fall mentioned. Leaving aside things we are not interested in knowing, there was also no mention whatsoever of Amane's performance. This could only be the work of Rua's family organization, which, as expected, used their dirty tricks to cover up the mistakes. Even so, the light that Amane now radiated could no longer be ignored. Thanks to social media, videos showcasing her talent were shared, and everyone at school began to see her differently. As we can see, the praise for her performance didn't stop. Seeing this, our protagonist was happy for her, because with the popularity she was gaining, none of those who used to bully her, not even that girl, could mess with her so easily again. Speaking of Rua, it seems this affected her deeply. After suffering such humiliation and being the cause of Amane going viral, she had no choice but to swallow her envy. She now had no option but to stay on the sidelines to avoid causing further scandals. As a result of all this, people could no longer ignore Amane. Thanks to her talent and constant effort, her popularity would only continue to grow. However, Kazuma knew that when that moment came, his own existence might become a burden for her. After all, with Rua completely obsessed with him, his closeness to Amane could become an obstacle in her path. After all, that woman still had enough connections to sabotage Amane if she wished. With that thought in mind, Kazuma saw no other option but to distance himself from Amane, if that meant not standing in the way of her dream. Thus, choosing separate paths, he told himself that at the very least, he would continue to watch over her from afar. But just as Kazuma decided to quietly walk away, Amane noticed him and, not caring about the people around her, stopped him with determination, and immediately pushed through the crowd just to approach him and greet him good morning. However, that wasn't the only reason she stopped him. Gathering her courage, she asked if they could continue practicing together after school, just as they had been doing until now. But upon hearing that, Kazuma considered the proposal unnecessary, since the event had already ended. That's when Amane explained that she had been contacted for an audition for a new anime, this time by a different agency than the one she was currently with. For that reason, she had been seriously considering switching agencies. She no longer wanted to continue as an idol. Instead, she wished to fully dedicate herself to working as a voice actress. That's why she wanted to keep practicing her acting with him. But Kazuma, hesitating, tried to explain the problems that might cause. However, the moment he said her name, Amane interrupted him, saying that from now on she didn't want him to call her Amane, but Mana, since that would be her new stage name. Witnessing the scene, everyone around them was left speechless by the nature of their relationship, particularly Rua, who was also present and now consumed by uncontrollable jealousy. demanded to know what that woman was doing with her beloved Kazuma. Back to our pair, Kazuma questioned Amain about the evident change in her personality, since ever since he had lifted her bangs, she had been acting with a confidence that left no trace of the shy girl she used to be. To that, Amain responded with total honesty, directly blaming him for lifting her bangs. Letting her true feelings show, she made it clear she wasn't afraid of success and told him he needed to take responsibility for having awakened this new version of her. At that moment, she stepped in close to him and hugged him without hesitation. Upon witnessing the scene, Ryua fell into deep despair, and that emotional blow made her realize the overwhelming advantage Amain had over her, causing her to faint on the spot. After all, she now had absolutely no chance of winning Kazuma back. Following Amain's performance, it was revealed that her popularity had increased significantly, and between her new job as a voice actress and her school responsibilities, her schedule had become so packed that the protagonist barely had a chance to see her. Even so, he couldn't help but notice the commotion caused by what had happened at the school gate, as everyone now referred to him as the gloomy guy Amain liked. And Ryua must also be mentioned, because the rumors about her reaction to seeing Amain approach Kazuma made it clear to everyone that even the school's princess had feelings for our broda. Nevertheless, putting those rumors aside, Kazuma's days had been surprisingly peaceful. However, on that particular day, the arrival of the popular boys was especially annoying, completely ruining the calm atmosphere. Among them stood out the guy who was a fan of Ryua, who, with obvious excitement, approached a girl to ask her out. To Kazuma's surprise, that girl was none other than Hiragi, the same one Ryua had used to lure him into the karaoke trap. It was revealed that Hiragi was considered the second most beautiful girl in the class, and was also a scholarship student who excelled in the school's dance program. Upon learning this and realizing he no longer had a chance with Ryua, the fan decided to pursue Hiragi as his second choice. However, after making his intentions so clear, Hiragi wasted no time in mocking him. Seeing how desperate he was to get a girlfriend, she didn't hesitate to make him look like a pathetic opportunist, prompting laughter from the other boys around them. Despite the humiliation, he persisted and asked her for a chance. It was then that Hiragi, with a sarcastic smile, revealed that she already had a boyfriend, leaving the boy completely bewildered and humiliated once again, as no one had mentioned that to him before. Though she showed a hint of pity for him, and with that air of grandeur that always accompanied her gestures, she let him know that there might be a chance, but only if he met a very specific condition. She said she only dated guys with money, and therefore wouldn't rule out breaking up with her current boyfriend if someone more competent came along. Upon hearing that, the boy tried to play his last card, claiming that he did have money, thinking that inviting her out for tea would be enough to impress her. But such a gesture meant absolutely nothing to her. Showing off her designer handbag, she said it was a piece from the latest season, and that her boyfriend had bought it for her without even asking the price. So, if he truly wanted a chance with her, he would have to invite her out for tea at least 10 times just to match a gift like that. And with that statement, she rejected him mercilessly, earning the laughter of everyone who witnessed the scene. Meanwhile, Kazuma showed no interest in the conversation at all, but having that noisy crowd in the classroom was irritating, especially because, being the popular boys, they could raise their voices as much as they wanted without anyone saying a thing. However, despite their behavior, what bothered him even more was noticing that they had taken over the seat of a girl who only wanted to sit and read a book. It was that injustice that pushed him to act, because unlike before, when he restrained himself to avoid going against Ryua, this time, he had no intention of staying silent. So, standing up, he walked straight toward Hiragi and, catching her attention, politely pointed out that the seat wasn't hers and kindly asked her to move. At first, Hiragi was completely stunned that someone would dare call her out, but she quickly recovered, reacting with hostility toward Kazuma. Raising her voice, she coldly told him not to speak to her as if they were acquaintances. As to her, he was nothing more than a lonely loser. Even so, Kazuma remained calm and reminded her that the bell was about to ring, and that it would be best if she returned to her seat, though that wasn't enough to make her back down. With arrogance, she declared that she would do whatever she pleased. With that look of disdain in her eyes, Kazuma concluded that Hiragi's rejection of him had begun long ago, recalling her cold demeanor during the karaoke incident. So, realizing that words wouldn't be enough, he decided to make her understand through actions. Without hesitation, he picked her up in front of everyone like a princess, causing Hiragi's hateful expression to turn into one of utter embarrassment. The entire classroom fell into stunned silence, as everyone struggled to process what Kazuma had just done. While the others remained frozen, our protagonist casually told the shy girl with glasses that she could now take her seat, stepping aside gently to give her space. But as soon as Kazuma put Hiragi down, she exploded with rage, unable to accept that a nobody had dared to touch her. Screaming, she shouted that she wouldn't allow Rua's lapdog to get away with humiliating her like that. However, in the midst of her yelling, the situation took an unexpected turn. Rua suddenly appeared in the classroom. Witnessing the scene and hearing the insults directed at Kazuma, she immediately walked over to Hiragi and, placing a hand on her shoulder with a look of absolute contempt, coldly asked what her precious Kazuma had done to deserve such insults. Nevertheless, Kazuma didn't get carried away by the moment. Despite Rua's intervention, which completely intimidated Hiragi, one only had to look at her to know she was expecting harsh consequences. Kazuma didn't see it as a gesture of reconciliation, but rather something that no longer held any value. Without even thanking her, he made it clear that he didn't want her meddling in his affairs, firmly reaffirming that he had no intention of returning to her side, as whatever they once had no longer existed. Now, they were simply two complete strangers, which was evident given how many days had passed since they last spoke. And although one might say that Rua had finally come to her senses, upon hearing such a harsh response from Kazuma, she couldn't help but break down. Unable to hold back her emotions, she demanded to know why he was still being so cruel to her, pouring out how much she still loved him and confessing that she had lost control when she saw him with Amane. But Kazuma was no longer willing to be manipulated by empty words. With the same coldness that had marked his distancing, he replied that he didn't belong to her, making it clear that he had no intention of staying by the side of a spoiled little pig who only knew how to sit and do nothing. And with that said, he returned to his seat, where, lost in thought, he realized that if he wanted to keep the freedom he now enjoyed, he had to completely cut ties with Rua's family. That's why the idea of becoming independent by getting a job occurred to him. After all, he still depended to some extent on Rua's family. So, while browsing job offers, one in particular caught his attention. A themed cafe with butlers and maids. Curiously, the ad piqued his interest, since he had some prior experience as a butler, which immediately reminded him of the days he spent at Rua's house, where he had been taught how to clean, serve, and behave with proper etiquette. After all, those skills might be useful in this new attempt to stand on his own. So, without wasting time, even though the place was a bit far, he decided to apply that very day. He was received by the cafe manager, who quickly gave him the green light after a brief conversation, telling him he could start working that very weekend. The immediate acceptance caught Kazuma by surprise, which didn't go unnoticed by the manager. She smiled and told him that just by looking at him, she knew he'd do an excellent job. She even said she was excited that someone like him had applied, explaining that the place wasn't very big and that currently it was just her in charge of the kitchen and one other girl who would now be his superior. She clarified that he could ask that girl anything he needed, assuring him that she was a kind person, so during the shift he could feel free to consult her about anything. And so, the long-awaited weekend finally arrived, marking Kazuma's first day at work. Upon entering the cafe and announcing he was there to start his shift, he was greeted by a maid who, at that very moment, dropped the cleaning supplies she was holding. The reason for such a reaction became immediately obvious. The girl who would be his superior was none other than Hiragi, who froze in place the moment she realized Kazuma had seen her in uniform. Unable to say a word, the silence between them grew awkward as her face flushed with embarrassment, knowing there was no way to hide anymore. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to Rua, still processing Kazuma's cold words, but far from seeing them as a definitive farewell. Her mind twisted them. instead of accepting that he wanted to distance himself from someone who had never made an effort. She interpreted his words as a test, to see if her love was strong enough. Looking at several pictures of him, she convinced herself it wasn't a rejection, but a challenge. Guided by increasingly warped logic, she began her descent into obsessive love, convinced that all she needed was to prove how much she had changed to make Kazuma fall in love with her, no matter the cost, or how many boundaries she had to cross. Back at the cafe, it turned out that the girl named Hiragi was, in fact, the senpai at the job Kazuma had applied to. Upon seeing him, she confronted him immediately, furious that he had found out where she worked, especially after making sure no one else knew. Upon learning he was the new hire, she flatly refused to accept it. However, Kazuma, observing her attitude, remained silent and calmly scanned the place. Hiragi, interpreting his silence, assumed he must be thinking about how pathetic she looked in that outfit, and told him that if he wanted to laugh, he should go ahead. Her reaction made it clear how much effort she had put into maintaining her image at school. But Kazuma wasn't judging her at all. Instead, he asked why she thought he would laugh at her, clarifying that he wouldn't, because she was working hard at her job. His words caught her off guard, and she immediately reacted like a classic tsundere, claiming that it's not like she was putting in effort or anything, and that she was only there for the money, doing the bare minimum. However, Kazuma had already looked around the place and noticed how meticulously she had been cleaning, pointing out how spotless everything was, although Hiragi tried to downplay it, saying someone else would have done it if she hadn't. Her excuses fell apart when Kazuma told her he admired the way she worked. That shut her up immediately, and despite her attitude, she ended up accepting him and sent him off to change into his uniform, saying she would teach him all the tasks he'd be responsible for. And so we saw how Hiragi really worked. With an energetic and kind attitude, she attended to every customer and showed just how much effort she put into providing excellent service. Kazuma hadn't expected it. Her behavior was completely different from what he knew at school. More than that, it didn't seem like she was forcing herself to be polite or faking kindness. On the contrary, it seemed like she genuinely enjoyed being there more than being at school, her face full of life. That's why our protagonist told himself he had to do his best not to get in her way. Time passed, and after the busiest hour, the calm of the afternoon gave them a moment to breathe. In a more relaxed tone, Hiragi asked if it was his first time working in a place like that, surprised at how quickly he had adapted. This made Kazuma happy, as it confirmed he hadn't been a burden to her. She even clarified that, far from being a nuisance, she should be thanking him for the support he had given her. But then she suddenly stopped. Without warning, her explosive attitude returned, and she declared that she couldn't get along with him, pointing out that they had been enemies ever since he ended his friendship with Rua. Upon hearing this, Kazuma confirmed that it was true he had cut ties with Rua, but that didn't mean she had to treat him with hostility. In response, Hiragi brought up the karaoke incident, emphasizing that she had been one of the people involved in mocking him, so he probably held a grudge. But our protagonist made it clear that he absolutely did not. After all, he knew that that pig Rua had dragged Hiragi into helping set up that trap. So, knowing she had just been following orders, it was to be expected that no one would have dared go against her. Putting that aside, Kazuma continued by saying that, at this moment, he didn't dislike her. On the contrary, he admired her. Seeing her do things with such energy and dedication, carrying out her tasks so meticulously, made him happy to have her as his senpai. Those words made Hiragi react and forget the issue with Rua and her differences with Kazuma. Dropping the aggressive attitude she had shown toward him up to that point, she now decided to give it her all to be a good and reliable senpai in that job. At that moment, changing the subject, she had a question. She wanted to know why Kazuma had served the last customer instead of letting her do it. He explained that the man had been staring at her intently and, based on his gestures, Kazuma could tell he was hiding a camera in his bag, so he stepped in to prevent a worse situation. However, the man's intentions were obvious, and Kazuma ended up asking why she hadn't kicked him out as well, since she surely noticed, questioning what had happened to all that confidence she usually showed at school. That's when we saw that Hiragi was completely immersed in her role as an employee. and wanting to avoid causing a scene that might hurt the cafe's reputation, she had chosen to ignore it. Seeing how important that place was to her, Kazuma didn't hesitate to tell her that the next time that customer came back, she should let him know so he could switch places with her. With those words, it was clear that our protagonist had earned her trust. But before they could continue talking, a new customer entered the cafe, and it was none other than Amen, who had come because she'd heard Kazuma was starting work that day. However, upon seeing the girl next to Kazuma, Amen couldn't help but wonder where she had seen her before. Let's not forget that Hiragi is one of the most prominent members of the dance club. Kazuma, seeing her completely freeze up, understood that she was excessively worried about people from school discovering her part-time job, since she wanted to maintain her image, so, supporting her in keeping her identity hidden, he told her she could go take her break while he attended to Amen. That's how, a few moments later, Amen received the ice cream she had ordered and took the opportunity to chat with Kazuma. During their conversation, she told him things were going well in her career as a voice actress, having already landed several important roles. However, she soon revealed a concern. Now that Kazuma had started working, she asked if Rua had gone to see him. Kazuma hadn't even considered telling her about his job, but given the circumstances, Amen ended up revealing that, apparently, Rua had taken a 2-week break, and for someone so popular, it was unusual to be absent for that long, which made Amen suspect that Rua was up to something strange, so she warned Kazuma to be careful. With that said, it was time for her to continue with her activities, but before leaving, she unexpectedly gave Kazuma a hug, which filled him with energy. Now he was fully recharged, ready to take on his next task. I mean, just look at her. She's pure cuteness. Even our protagonist knew it, because she had become someone truly radiant. Ever since freeing herself from Ryua's agency, she seemed to have taken back control of her own future. Taking Amen's warning seriously, Kazuma told himself that if Ryua ever tried something again that could threaten the normal life he had fought so hard to build, then he'd have no choice but to personally take care of that pig. And while all that was happening, Hiragi couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. After seeing the hug Amen gave Kazuma, she now wondered what kind of relationship those two really had. After all, Amen had recently become the center of attention at school due to her growing popularity. And although Hiragi remembered hearing rumors that she got along well with Kazuma, she had dismissed them as false at the time. However, after witnessing that scene, she couldn't help but feel uneasy, especially because, despite their good relationship, Kazuma had gone out of his way to help her stay hidden, which made her wonder if maybe Kazuma was actually a good guy. Then we returned to Ryua's channel, where, in a more reflective tone than usual, she mentioned that she had recently learned something from a friend, that the most important thing is effort. After giving it some thought, she ended up agreeing, and now she was wondering what kind of effort would be meaningful to her. That's when she realized how she could apply it. If she truly wanted to protect the people she considered essential in her life, she could do so by letting her own strength speak for itself. With that resolve in mind, she told her grandfather, who immediately promised to support her in anything she needed. From there, she slightly changed the subject to tell her followers that, since her grandfather had always supported her, she had decided to take a 2-week break to spend time with him. And with that, she ended her video, leaving us intrigued about what her next plan might be. A week had passed since Kazuma started his part-time job, and now we saw him changing into his butler uniform. By this point, it was easy to see why Ryua hadn't given up on trying to win him over. Just then, Hiragi suddenly entered the changing room, and surprised and nervous, she ended up catching a glimpse of what Kazuma had been hiding, letting out a scream and scolding him for changing there. But it's not like Kazuma had many options. Technically, that was the girls' changing room, but there wasn't one for boys, since apparently, he was the first male employee to ever work there, making incidents like that inevitable. Later, once Hiragi had calmed down, she asked him if he was okay. Having noticed that his back was covered in scars, Kazuma, without going into detail, told her they were from a long time ago, and not to worry about them. Once his condition was confirmed, Hiragi took the opportunity to admire his muscles. Clearly captivated, and began asking questions like whether he was part of any sports club or followed a special workout routine. Kazuma humbly replied that he used to train a little, but he wasn't in any club at the moment, and to avoid revealing more about his past, he changed the subject and asked her if she was interested. Hiragi was speechless for a moment and, thinking he was teasing her, bluntly told him not to flatter himself so much, saying she was used to seeing things like that, and even pointed out that she had a boyfriend with whom she had already done everything. Playing along, Kazuma apologized for assuming she was embarrassed, admitting that she was right. She clearly was an adult with romantic experience. Putting that aside, they began their shift at the cafe. It was mentioned that today, their manager had left them in charge of the place, as he had gone home early with a cold. Despite that, they managed to keep everything under control. After getting through the busiest hour of the day, only the cleaning remained. However, a group of troublemakers appeared at the cafe, and one of them didn't hesitate to include the waitress as part of his order. It was clearly a cliché, some guy trying to flirt with a waitress, so Kazuma decided to let Hiragi handle it, remembering how easily she used to deal with guys like that back in school. However, it seemed that when working, she took on a much sheer personality compared to the cold attitude she usually displayed at school. This made the protagonist quickly wonder if, once again, she was holding back because she was dealing with a customer. But just then, the guy in front of her quickly crossed the line, trying to lift her skirt and blackmailing her by saying she should cooperate if she didn't want him to make a scene in the cafe. Even the men who were with him suggested she give in, warning her that he was a karate master and not someone to mess with other customers now paying attention to the situation. The man tried to intimidate everyone by showing off his strength. He attempted to break a bottle, but ended up just tossing it into the air. Kazuma effortlessly caught it and walked straight to the table where the troublemakers were, placed the bottle down, and in a single motion, showed them how it was really done. His presence radiated such intensity that the customers applauded as if it were a spontaneous performance. But the thugs, stunned by the display, weren't going to stay quiet. Their leader raised his voice at Kazuma, saying he shouldn't get cocky just for cutting a bottle. That didn't make him strong. He was about to attack when Kazuma, with lightning speed, struck him in the throat and knocked him to the ground. No one noticed how it happened, making it look like the guy had fallen on his own. Without giving him a chance to respond, Kazuma calmly ordered him to keep quiet in the cafe and reassured him not to worry about the bill. He'd cover it himself with his wages as compensation for the hit. However, leaning in close to the guy, Kazuma warned him in a dark tone never to return to the cafe and to stay away from Hiragi. Hearing that threat, the man had no choice but to flee, followed by the rest of his group. With the problem resolved, Kazuma asked Hiragi if she was okay. Without saying a word, she gave him a shy hug, telling him not to get too full of himself over what he did, that she was about to give those guys a proper scolding, but he beat her to it. Witnessing this scene, the regular customers at the cafe started calling Kazuma a hero, pointing out that those guys had already caused a lot of trouble in the area. Some even joked with Hiragi, saying she did well to get herself such a wonderful boyfriend, which embarrassed her so much that she could barely correct the misunderstanding, insisting to the customers that he wasn't her boyfriend. Amid all this, Kazuma noticed a man who seemed completely uninterested in what had just happened. But time passed, and eventually it was time to close. While they cleaned the last tables, Kazuma apologized to Hiragi, saying that it looked like the regulars had misunderstood and assumed they were a couple. This time, however, despite her usual tsundere behavior, she told him it wasn't a big deal and, to his surprise, even tried to apologize for how arrogant she had been, admitting that he had indeed saved her from those guys. However, before she could even finish, Kazuma interrupted her, saying he was stepping out for a moment because it looked like a customer had forgotten something. He was going to try to catch up with him to return the item. While she waited for him at the cafe, she wondered why she could never be honest with her words. Meanwhile, Kazuma caught up with the customer, telling him he had forgotten something. The man checked his belongings and confirmed he had everything. Keys, phone, and wallet were all there. He asked Kazuma if perhaps he had made a mistake, but Kazuma showed him a small device he had found on the man's table, one that looked suspiciously like a spy microphone. The man remained silent for a moment, then claimed it wasn't his and tried to act like it belonged to someone else, insisting that there were dangerous people in the area and things like that weren't unusual. But Kazuma clarified that, compared to the 3 thugs from earlier, this man felt far more unsettling. He said that while everyone else had looked toward the table where the men were seated, this guy was the only one who kept his head down, and although the man tried to justify it by saying he was just scared, Kazuma responded that he had seemed far too calm, so much so that he had timed the placement of the microphone perfectly. That was enough for Kazuma to stop playing along, as our protagonist wasn't about to fall into his traps. Still hoping to get away with it, the man attempted a surprise attack on Kazuma, but the move was useless. The protagonist dodged it effortlessly and, with a single motion, pinned him down. Cornered, the man gave a forced smile, as if what was happening only confirmed something he had already suspected. He commented that this was exactly what one would expect from the genius of the proud Takayachiki family, revealing that the legends about Kazuma being the strongest among the 10 prodigies weren't unfounded. Those words made it clear that Kazuma's past, the one he had tried for so long to leave behind, had finally returned to interfere with his attempt to live a normal life. Back with Hiragi, who had seen Kazuma go after a customer who had supposedly forgotten something, she couldn't help but comment on how incredible the protagonist was. Even though he had only been there for a week, he did a flawless job. She emphasized that, although he didn't stand out at school, he had some impressive skills that made dealing with those thugs seem effortless. But more than anything, she added that, despite how badly she had treated him, Kazuma had always been kind to her. That, along with the time she had spent getting to know him, made her finally want to tell him the truth she had been hiding. So, when he returned, she wanted to talk to him. At that moment, the scene returned to Kazuma, who was still holding the man down, just after he mentioned that the protagonist was the strongest among the 10 prodigies of the Takayachiki family. Kazuma realized this man had been sent by Rua, and it seemed she had been gathering information over the past few days with the clear intention of eliminating all the girls around him. Kazuma asked the man about this, but he refused to answer. With nothing more to get out of him, Kazuma had no choice but to let him go, but not without first destroying the microphone and giving him a stern warning to never come near him again. However, the man refused to let it end there. Having failed his mission, he couldn't return empty-handed, knowing the consequences that awaited him. With no other option, he decided to face Kazuma directly. Pulling out a knife, he declared that if he managed to defeat a legend of the underworld, maybe his life wouldn't be completely ruined, provoking Kazuma even more. He said that once he was done with him, he would go torture the girl he left behind at the cafe to earn Rua's favor. But Kazuma remained unfazed by the threats, forcing the man to attack. Just as he was about to land a blow, Kazuma effortlessly deflected it. Before the man could recover, Kazuma made him stumble and threw him to the ground. Then, our protagonist told him that just this once, he would spare his life, and advised him to sever all ties with the Takayachiki family, just as he had done. With those words, Kazuma knocked him unconscious and walked away. A few moments later, after the cafe had closed, we see Kazuma cleaning. During this, he discovered more hidden microphones that confirmed his suspicions about Rua's absence. He realized she hadn't shown up because she had already been watching him indirectly. Because of that, Kazuma quietly disposed of each device before Hiragi could notice them. It was then that she returned, saying she had finished cleaning the kitchen. Seeing that he had also finished with the tables, she suggested they talk for a while, taking advantage of their manager's permission to use some things from the cafe. So, after preparing some tea, Hiragi began the conversation by asking why he had decided to work there. Kazuma replied that he wanted to try living like a normal student, take the chance to earn some money, and, most of all, stop living under the shadow of that pig Rua, who had been looking after him his whole life. Hearing him mock her so casually made Hiragi laugh, surprised that Kazuma was the only person she knew who could speak that way about someone everyone else feared, given the weight the Takayachiki name carried. However, Kazuma turned the question around and asked her why she worked there, since it wasn't exactly a secret at school that she was admired for always having brand name items, clearly suggesting money wasn't an issue. But upon hearing that, Hiragi went quiet for a few seconds before responding, with a sincerity that seemed difficult for her. She confessed that all those items were fake. She revealed that everything she wore was an imitation, admitting that her financial situation was far from what it seemed. Ever since her father left, they could barely make ends meet. That was the real reason she started working at the cafe, letting out everything she had kept inside. She broke down, saying that the Hiragi everyone at school knew was nothing more than a facade. Because she felt inferior to the other girls, she had created an image of herself based on money, brands, even a fake boyfriend. But in the end, all those stories were just lies to get attention. With all that said, Kazuma asked why she was telling him all this, but Hiragi didn't know for sure. She simply wanted him to listen, because continuing to lie to him just hurt more. She also wanted to apologize for what happened at karaoke and for the things she had said back then. In that moment, she had claimed that Kazuma was basically Ryua's servant, but now she bitterly admitted that the title suited her better. To stay in the group, she had become just another follower, pleasing Ryua and obeying her every order. She even mentioned that the day she went to karaoke with the new image she wanted to present, she acted coldly toward him because she saw herself in him, remembering how she, too, had tried to get along with others behind the same kind of facade she was just starting to build. So, she said it was okay if he wanted to hate her. Even though she had treated him coldly and knew she could have ended up just like him, she admitted to being a liar, someone insecure and vain. That was her true self, one she deeply hated. However, despite all that, Kazuma told her that he still admired her, not because of her status, or her supposed boyfriend, or her brand name items. He admired her because of how hardworking and dedicated she was at her job, something he could see when she wasn't wearing any masks. To him, she was a wonderful maid and also an incredible senpai. Those words left her completely red-faced, and she told him he shouldn't compliment her so lightly. After all, his girlfriend might get the wrong idea. That comment caught Kazuma off guard, which led Hiragi to ask if he wasn't dating Amane, since it was obvious how much Amane liked him. But the protagonist simply said they weren't dating. Though Hiragi didn't believe him, it was obvious how close they were when she visited, and there were rumors that they spent a lot of time together. It was then that Kazuma admitted they were somewhat close, but that it was more than just a simple friendship. Hearing that sent a wave of happiness through Hiragi, who, once that misunderstanding had been cleared up, asked him if he was truly not dating anyone. Because, if that was the case, she wanted to know if someone like her could try being with him. But before she could finish asking that question, the door burst open. Ryua appeared at the entrance, accompanied by another girl who followed behind her. As she walked into the cafe, she greeted Kazuma in an overly sweet tone, noticing that the other girl, the thief, was also present. Ignoring that, she commented on how long it had been since they last saw each other. But now that she had cut off communication with her servants and the microphone signals had disappeared, she came to see him, asking if he could finally recognize how much effort she had put in for him. As expected, her attitude had taken a drastic turn. From being a spoiled girl, she had become a stalker willing to do anything to get Kazuma's attention. To further prove her supposed devotion, Ryua explained that she had even borrowed a special item from her grandfather to accomplish her goal. That's when she introduced Jinakami Rei, one of the newest additions to the Takayachiki family's group of 10 prodigies. Despite her short stature, her reputation preceded her. She was said to be incredibly strong, and Kazuma could confirm it just by looking at her. At that moment, Ryua added that she had brought Rei in case things got complicated, as her intention was to get rid of a certain piece of useless trash that had recently become an obstacle. She then moved forward without hesitation and went straight to Hiragi, glaring at her with disdain as she asked why she was messing with her beloved. Hiragi was completely confused. She had no idea how Ryua even knew she worked there. But the surprise didn't end there. With an arrogant smile, Ryua revealed that of course she knew. Every one of her classmates had been thoroughly investigated. She knew perfectly well that Hiragi had been lying for a while, although at this point she no longer cared. In fact, she confessed that she had allowed those lies simply because she found them amusing. However, now that Hiragi had dared to get close to the boy she liked, Ryua had to declare war on her, and not in the sweet, romantic comedy way seen in other manga. but in a way where she planned to win no matter what, threatening to revoke her scholarship, or rather, to expel her outright. Rua made it clear that Haragi was in no position to try seducing Kazuma. She also reminded her that she had been one of those involved in the karaoke incident meant to bother him, making it all the more ridiculous to see her now trying to get close to him. At that moment, Kazuma stepped in, saying that he didn't hold a grudge against Haragi and that he had known from the beginning it had all been Rua's idea. But upon hearing that, Rua immediately ordered him to shut up, insisting that this was a conversation between girls and that if he really wanted to stop her, he would first have to face Rei. Continuing her conversation with Haragi, Rua said the lies she told were pretty funny, recalling one in particular where Haragi claimed to have had a date with her boyfriend at the bay, after which he walked her home and kissed her goodbye. Just remembering it seemed so ridiculous to Rua that she confessed she had to put in a lot of effort not to laugh out loud in front of everyone. To top off the humiliation, she threw it in Haragi's face that she knew perfectly well that Haragi had never had a boyfriend in her life. Hearing how Rua mocked Haragi, Kazuma didn't just stand by, avoiding a direct confrontation with Rua so that Rei wouldn't step in. He simply took Haragi by the arm and, without hesitation, kissed her. If Rua was going to mock her lies, then he would make them come true himself. And with that kiss, Rua's defeat was becoming more and more inevitable. At this rate, our stalker is on her way to becoming a full-fledged yandere. To begin with, picking up exactly where we left off, after Kasuma delivers that kiss without the slightest hesitation, he pulls back just a little. Almost immediately, in a calm yet subtly provocative tone, he points out that Aya's supposed lack of experience doesn't seem very convincing anymore. Because of that single comment, the mood shifts in an instant, and the air grows heavy and suffocating. In response, Rua's jealousy completely takes over. Without stopping to think, she coldly orders Rei to eliminate that girl. For Rei, who has lived her entire life as nothing more than a tool, questioning an order is never an option. As a result, she gathers her strength and launches herself straight toward them. However, Kasuma reacts immediately. In one swift motion, he pushes Aya out of harm's way and, anticipating Rei's path, counters with a powerful kick. Even so, Rei blocks the attack effortlessly, taking no damage at all. Moments later, she lands calmly in front of him, as if that brief clash meant absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, Aya can only watch in silence, trapped between fear and confusion, unable to fully understand what's happening. At that point, Kasuma deliberately provokes Rei, openly challenging the newest member of the 10 elites. By pretending to underestimate her, he clearly strikes a nerve. But before anything else can happen, Rua steps in, snapping Rei back to reality. Once again, she orders her to ignore Kasuma completely, reminding her that her only mission is to eliminate the so-called homewrecker cat. With that goal firmly in mind, Rei prepares one of her specialized weapons. Shortly after, she gathers momentum once more and leaps high into the air, ready to finish Aya in a single decisive strike. Yet, before she can land the blow, Kasuma effortlessly grabs her by the foot midair. Without giving her any chance to react, he yanks her down by the hair, treating her like a rookie assassin. That's when something unexpected happened. Rei smiles. In fact, she looks like she's enjoying the situation. In that instant, Kasuma realizes the truth. Having been treated as a tool her entire life, clashing with a powerful opponent might be the only freedom she's ever known. Taking a more serious tone, Kasuma urges her to sever all ties with the Takwachiki family. Naturally, Rei questions why she would ever do such a thing. In response, Kasuma reveals that he was once just like her. Because he understands her suffering firsthand, he tells her that she has a choice to be free, just as he once chose. Going even further, he offers her a place to start over, suggesting she could work for him and experience a normal life. Hearing this, Rei briefly turns her gaze toward Aya. At the same time, Aya begins to question who Kasuma truly is. Suddenly, Rua breaks the moment, shouting in desperation for Rei to hurry up and finish the job. When Rei doesn't respond, Rua accuses her of disobeying orders. At that accusation, Rei's expression hardens, and her bloodlust returns. Seeing this, Kasuma immediately realizes that things won't be resolved so easily. After all, it took him years to escape the grip of that family. Because of that, he prepares himself, ready to protect Aya at all costs. Just then, an unexpected presence arrives. Standing beside Rua, we're introduced to her cousin, Sakura. As previously hinted, she turns out to be Kasuma's former master, belonging to another branch of the Takayachiki family, the one responsible for taking out the trash. Almost instantly, it becomes clear how respected Sakura is, as she's the only one capable of standing up to Rua. After apologizing for the chaos her cousin has caused, Sakura points out how casually Rua is talking about killing Aya, and worse, about using a Takayachiki weapon like Rei to do it. She then warns her that she's gone too far, reminding her that Rei was meant to serve as protection, not an executioner. Subtly but firmly, Sakura adds that if their grandfather were to learn that Rua used his authority to eliminate a friend, he might begin to question her character. Faced with that unspoken threat, Rua panics, suddenly terrified of losing everything she's been given. Sensing her hesitation, Sakura presses the advantage and calmly offers a deal. She'll keep everything a secret, as long as Rua apologizes and returns home without causing any further trouble. In the end, though clearly unwilling, Rua finally agrees to comply. Swallowing her pride, she forces herself to apologize to Aya for nearly ordering her execution. Seeing this, Kasuma is left completely stunned. In his own thoughts, he repeats that this is the first time Rua has ever apologized to anyone. Naturally, he can't help but wonder whether she truly reflected on her actions at all during the time he was gone. Soon after, Aya steps forward as well, apologizing for having lied for so long. Surprisingly enough, Ryue accepts that apology. However, she makes it very clear that her forgiveness ends there. Lying is one thing, but getting close to her beloved Kasuma is another matter entirely. Once again, she loses her composure and threatens Aya, proving to Kasuma beyond any doubt that Rua hasn't changed in the slightest. Before the situation can escalate any further, Rei intervenes, physically dragging Rua out of the shop to put an end to the chaos. Meanwhile, Sakura remains behind, taking the opportunity to speak privately with Kasuma. Without wasting time, Sakura gets straight to the point and asks whether he intends to return to the Takayachiki family. In response, Kasuma calmly states that he has no intention of going back. Seeing how firm his resolve is, Sakura warns him that their grandfather won't give up so easily. His obsession with forcing Kasuma to marry Rua runs so deep that he's willing to use every ounce of power he has to make it happen. Even so, Kasuma couldn't care less about that so-called minor inconvenience. After all, he already anticipated this outcome. That's precisely why he chose to sever all ties with the family in the first place. What he truly wants isn't power or status, but a normal, peaceful life. Hearing this, Sakura bursts out laughing, admitting that she expected nothing less from him. Although she remains doubtful that he'll ever truly obtain the quiet life he desires, she decides it's time to part ways. Before leaving, she adds that next time, she'd like to return as an ordinary customer. Kasuma replies with a smile, promising her a special service worthy of her status. Still, Sakura quickly tempers his enthusiasm, reminding him not to get his hopes up, because the next time they meet, they may very well be enemies. With that, it becomes clear that Sakura is the only member of the Takayachiki family Kasuma genuinely respects. She bids farewell to her former apprentice, perhaps realizing that they may never stand on the same side again. Back inside, Aya is still frozen in shock. Noticing this, Kasuma gently asks if she's alright. That question alone snaps her back to reality. She admits she didn't understand anything that just happened, comparing the experience to being inside a video game where she nearly got deleted. Because of that, Kasuma apologizes for dragging her into such a dangerous mess. However, Aya takes responsibility as well, acknowledging that she provoked Rua, and even believing this whole ordeal was karma for lying for so long. But then, as soon as she remembers that lie, something else hits her. Kasuma kissed her. Immediately, her face turns bright red, trying to change the subject. She thanks him for protecting her instead. Then, picking up their conversation from before Rua interrupted, she asks why he's always so kind to her, especially when she doesn't even feel worthy of being his friend. Kasuma hesitates, admitting that he doesn't really have an answer. he confesses that he's never had friends before, so he doesn't even know what normal looks like. Still, he tells her that he respects her for who she is, and to him, that's more than enough reason to get along with her. Even so, Aya isn't fully satisfied with that. After everything she's put him through, she wants to do something to make up for it. Kasuma agrees, and without missing the opportunity, he already knows exactly what to ask. Somewhat shyly, he asks if she'd go clothes shopping with him. He admits he still hasn't recovered from what happened at karaoke and believes his makeover failed because he has no idea what counts as normal. Because of that, he wants her help finding a style that actually suits him. Without hesitation, Aya happily takes his arm and says she'd love to help. Smiling brightly, she's already imagining how to turn him into the coolest guy imaginable. Kasuma, on the other hand, would be perfectly satisfied just looking normal. However, when he continues calling her by her surname, Jiragi, Aya stops him and asks that he use her first name instead, adding that she'll do the same for him. When Kasuma finally says Aya, she gathers the courage to bring up the kiss again. At first, Kasuma assumes she's about to scold him for not asking beforehand. Instead, Aya tells him she isn't upset at all. In fact, since it was her first kiss, she simply wishes it had been a little more romantic. Hearing that, Kasuma realizes this is an easy fix. Without hesitation, he gently pulls her close and kisses her again. But even that isn't enough, as Aya shyly asks for one more. And just like that, she confidently declares herself in the lead in the race to win Kasuma's heart. Some time later, school life had returned to its usual rhythm. It was on an ordinary day when Aya's classmates, curious and somewhat shocked, approached her with an urgent question. Was it true that she was transferring to another class? Aya calmly confirmed it, pointing out that a lot had happened recently. Ryua, who was nearby, didn't miss the chance to step in. With an arrogant smile, she backed up Aya's statement and remarked that indeed, too much had happened. Then, she added that Aya would not only be switching classes, but would also have to retake the exam for special students, and if she failed, she would lose her privileged status and become an ordinary student. With a clearly mocking tone, Rua asked if Aya was really okay with that, and if she could even afford to pay tuition without the benefit of the special scholarship. Despite the provocation, Aya responded with an unshaken smile. She assured them it wouldn't be a problem, as she was confident she would pass the exam. Then, turning her gaze toward Rua, she looked at her with unwavering determination. The atmosphere immediately shifted, and a silent tension settled over the classroom, so heavy that even the nearby students could sense the rivalry between the two. But in that moment, the classroom door creaked open. It was none other than Honda. Without hesitation, Aya walked directly toward her. Honda, surprised by the sudden approach, asked with slight concern if something had happened. With a serious and sincere expression, Aya explained that this would be her last day in that classroom, and before leaving, there was something she needed to say. Suddenly, she bowed respectfully and began apologizing for having taken Honda's seat without permission, for her behavior, and for having made her feel uncomfortable all that time. Honda, clearly surprised, hurried to reassure her, saying there was no need to apologize. But Aya continued, thanking her for her understanding and opening up even more. She confessed that her past arrogance stemmed from her status as a special student, a label she had allowed to define her actions. However, she had reached an important conclusion. There were incredible people without titles, and others with them who completely lacked character. Once again, she expressed her regret, but before the moment could settle, Rua interrupted, her voice loud and laced with sarcasm. She mocked Aya's supposed transformation, questioning where that good girl act had suddenly come from after deceiving everyone. Her words caused confusion among the classmates, some of whom demanded to know what she meant. Feigning innocence, Rua asked if they truly hadn't noticed it yet. According to her, Aya had been hiding something all along. But just before Rua could say more, a firm voice broke the tension. It was our protagonist, Kasuma. His voice rose, silencing the room as he reminded Rua of Sakura's warning, that she wasn't allowed to lay a finger on Aya. Rua, upon seeing him, became overly excited, but quickly defended herself, claiming that she hadn't touched anyone and was only talking. She insisted she was simply telling the truth. But Aya gently intervened, her voice filled with gratitude, and thanked Kasuma for standing up for her, but said she wanted to handle the situation her own way. Her composure surprised Kasuma. Turning to her classmates, Aya took a deep breath and made her own confession. She bowed deeply and revealed the truth. Her family was not wealthy. In fact, they were going through financial hardship, and she worked several part-time jobs just to support herself and continue studying. The story about a college boyfriend was completely made up. She had lied, and for that, she offered a sincere apology. With raw honesty, Aya continued explaining how she had always followed Ryua's example, hiding in her shadow out of fear and social pressure. But that chapter of her life was over. With a firm voice, she declared that she would no longer let that fear control her, and she stated that from that moment on, she would no longer see Ryua as someone superior, but simply as an ordinary person. As soon as those words left her mouth, Ryua's expression twisted with irritation. She exploded, demanding to know what the hell Aya was talking about. But Aya responded calmly, explaining that she had been observing Ryua for a while and had realized just how excessively spoiled she had become, pampered to the point of inflating her ego beyond reason. Ryua, confused and defensive, asked what the hell Aya was trying to say exactly. The classroom had fallen completely silent, and everyone was watching the scene intently. Then came Aya's surprising response. She said that what Ryua really needed was a friend she could be honest with. That left Ryua utterly bewildered, her eyes widening in disbelief. Then Ryua began to mock her, saying she didn't need anything like that. But Aya didn't flinch. With firm conviction, she declared that she would be her friend, whether Ryua liked it or not. Watching from the side, the protagonist couldn't help but feel amazed by Aya's strength of character. Despite everything Ryua had done to her, the offenses, the tension, Aya still had the heart to forgive her and even offer her friendship. In that moment, she didn't just seem brave, she seemed extraordinary. However, Aya wasn't done yet. She smiled and said they could be friends, but only if one condition was clear: she had no intention of giving up on Kazuma. The classroom fell into absolute silence as Ryua stood frozen. Kazuma, equally stunned, stared at her in disbelief. Aya continued, explaining that although friendship might be possible, when it came to him, they were rivals. With confidence, she walked straight up to Kazuma. She looked him in the eyes and warned him to be ready, then without hesitation, took his arm and kissed him on the cheek. It was a bold act, a declaration of intent. Smiling, she declared that she didn't plan to lose, neither to Ryua nor to Amen. The classroom erupted into chaos. First came a wave of stunned silence, followed by a flood of whispers and complaints, especially from the boys, who murmured that first Amen had stolen the spotlight, and now Aya had done the same. As for Ryua, she was no longer simply irritated. She seemed possessed by pure fury. Her anger boiled over, and she shouted that she would destroy Aya. Sometime later, Ryua found herself face to face with Sakura. She demanded to know what she could do, but Sakura interrupted her. She reminded Ryua that destroying others was not an option. She mentioned that she had turned a blind eye once, but next time, there would be consequences. Furthermore, Sakura added that Ryua could no longer rely on Rei. That strategy was over. This news frustrated Ryua, who insisted she had no choice and had to stay close to Kazuma, since more and more girls were starting to approach him, and the last one had even kissed him on the cheek. Sakura, slightly amused, offered a suggestion. She told Ryua that maybe she should do the same, but the idea was immediately rejected. Ryua firmly refused, saying there was no way she would make the first move. Then, in her classic tsundere style, she added that maybe, if Kazuma asked her nicely, she might consider it. Sakura, watching the blushing girl in front of her, let out a long sigh, saying that maybe it was time to try a new approach. So she told Ryua that instead of trying to dominate others, why not approach Kazuma in a way that would genuinely please him? Why not focus on what made him happy? That way, she might finally stand out among all the others. Hearing this, Ryua fell silent, clearly lost in thought. Seeing her like that, Sakura immediately asked if something was wrong. But Ryua's silence broke into a smile. She pointed at Sakura and said she was absolutely right. With renewed energy, Ryua announced that she was going to visit her grandfather, so she had no time to waste. She said goodbye and disappeared with determination, leaving Sakura behind, not entirely sure if Ryua had truly understood the advice and wondering whether she would be okay. Some time after those events, a young woman of great beauty entered the student council room. The students present received her with respect, addressing her as president. She, for her part, responded to the greeting politely and, without wasting time, proceeded to give instructions to one of the council members. Meanwhile, a large group of students gathered outside the classroom, known as the president's fans, were commenting that, as always, she looked stunning. They also added that she did an impeccable job leading the student council. Not only did she manage it efficiently, but she also ran her own company. On top of that, she had maintained the highest GPA since enrolling at the institution and was the most outstanding among the scholarship students. In short, a true beauty with talent. In the middle of that conversation, one of the boys, driven by curiosity, asked whether the president had a boyfriend. His friend replied that it seemed impossible. Even if someone tried, he would never be worthy of her. In fact, it was inconceivable to imagine anyone occupying that position. Besides, she possessed an enviably striking attractiveness. Another student chimed in to affirm that this was true and declared that, if he had to choose, he would prefer the president over Princess Rua. At that very moment, the latter entered the area, greeting everyone naturally. She said good morning with a tense smile that barely concealed her irritation. It was clear that she had heard the previous comment. Without beating around the bush, the princess asked one of the boys to step aside because he was blocking her way, stating that she had matters to attend to in the student council room. The young man immediately obeyed, and she moved forward, muttering that the situation was rather annoying. Once inside, she went straight to the president and, without preamble, handed her a document. She then explained that it contained the school's new regulations and asked her to review them, adding that her grandfather, the principal, had already approved them. The president took the paper, read it carefully, and could not prevent her expression from turning concerned. At that moment, Rua stated that she had several pending matters and needed to leave. She also indicated that, since the document had already been delivered, the official announcement would be made the following day. After those words, she left the room, leaving the president quietly complaining about what promised to become a genuine headache. The next day, the students lined up in the assembly hall. Then the academy's principal raised his voice and proclaimed that he would not tolerate mediocre students. At that institution, he declared, winners were forged, the future of Japan. That was both his mission and the academy's. With that purpose, he announced the implementation of a new system designed to reinforce that competitive spirit. According to his explanation, it would be a badge system. Students who reached the top and stood out for their performance would wear gold badges, while those at a lower level would wear silver badges. To provide further details, the principal announced that he would invite forward the student who had conceived the proposal. He then called Takeachiki Rua. Ryua stepped up to the podium and, in her unmistakable idol-like voice, announced that the new system would serve as motivation for everyone. First, she stated that students who earned gold badges would be able to wear them with pride, as they would be a visible recognition of their effort and, at the same time, an incentive to push themselves even further. As for the rest, she explained that they would receive silver badges as a symbol of perseverance and as a reminder that they should strive for the very top. She also reminded everyone that at the academy there was the possibility of becoming a scholarship student midway through the academic year, meaning that no one could afford to lower their guard. Therefore, it was necessary to excel both academically and in extracurricular activities if they wished to compete on equal footing with the scholarship students and not fall behind. In response to the announcement, many students were enthusiastic and commented that it was an excellent idea that increased their motivation. However, the protagonist considered that the system could be quite dangerous. In that context, Rua urged everyone to respect those who wore gold badges, pointing out that they represented valuable assets to the academy. With those words, she concluded the explanation of the new system. After stepping down from the podium, Ryua walked through the center of the hall. As she passed by the protagonist, she winked at him. He responded with a gesture of disdain. Meanwhile, two students standing beside him, convinced that the signal had been meant for them, began arguing about which of the two had been the true recipient of the princess's wink. While those two were arguing heatedly, the protagonist felt a deep sense of foreboding about the whole matter. Consequently, a few moments later, he headed to the infirmary. On the way, he could not stop wondering why the president of the student council, such an intelligent and sensible person, had agreed to such a system. However, while absorbed in those thoughts, he opened the infirmary door and froze. Standing before him was the president in an unexpected situation. He reacted immediately. He turned his face away, apologized hurriedly, and announced that he would leave at once. Nevertheless, she asked him to wait a moment. Then she told him to come in and close the door, though she made it clear that he had to wait a moment. As she finished getting dressed, the president, in a firm voice, asked whether he was Kasuma Suzuki, a first-year student from Class 1, who looked visibly bewildered. At that precise identification, he asked how she knew those details. The president replied naturally that she knew the name and grade of every student in the school. Shortly afterward, she informed him that she was finished and that he could turn around. The protagonist apologized again. However, the president calmly denied that it was his fault. Even so, she added that unfortunately she could not simply let him leave. She commented that, from her point of view, a boy having seen her in such circumstances before marriage was unacceptable and contrary to her values. Therefore, she stated that he had the right to choose. The protagonist looked at her in confusion at those words. Then she clarified that he only had two options: leave the school or marry her. That declaration left him completely stunned. After a few seconds of bewilderment, he managed to reply that leaving the school would cause him serious problems. As a result, the president nodded calmly and responded that, in that case, only the second option remained: to marry her. Moreover, she added that, if he chose so, from that moment on she would be in his hands. He remained open-mouthed, unable to comprehend what was happening. Then, in a cordial tone, she said it was a pleasure to meet him, which led the protagonist to wonder whether what had just happened had been a joke. Could the president, known for her firm and reserved character, truly be capable of something like that? It certainly contrasted completely with the image he had of her. Interrupting his thoughts, the president asked what had brought him to the infirmary and whether he was feeling unwell. The protagonist replied that one could say yes. However, what truly concerned him was something more important. He had a question that would not stop troubling him. At this statement, the president invited him to explain himself, and he took the opportunity to ask her directly about the newly announced system. Faced with the question, and with discomfort that was difficult to conceal, the president explained that the proposal had been presented by Rua, a member of the student council, and that the body had approved it. The protagonist frowned and became more direct. He clarified that this answer did not resolve what he truly wanted to know and asked whether, personally, she agreed with the system. She stated that she did. However, her response was accompanied by a slight stutter and evident tension. In response, he did not hesitate to argue that the method was problematic and could lead to serious consequences. He added that he was convinced that, deep down, she did not support it. He even suggested that her presence in the infirmary might be due to the distress caused by having accepted a rule she did not truly agree with. Before he could continue, the president silenced him. She pointed out that he looked very unwell and declared the conversation over. Then she announced that she would go find a teacher to examine him and, without adding anything else, left the infirmary. The protagonist remained silent, reflecting. At that moment, the president's reaction confirmed his suspicions. She did not agree with the system, but for some reason she could not express it openly. Finally, he concluded that everything must be related to Ryua's influence, the principal's granddaughter. That thought led him to wonder what she might be plotting and what her true intentions were. Moments later, upon returning to class, our protagonist ran into Rua, who greeted him with a smile. She immediately asked him what he thought of her presentation at the school assembly. In response, he took a moment before answering that, to be honest, he thought the system she had proposed was terrible and should be eliminated immediately. As expected, the comment upset her. She tried to ignore it, but then she said that she finally understood why he kept his distance from her. She added that she knew very well he had always wanted to shine, and that being next to someone with a radiance as intense as hers overshadowed him. That was why, surely, he wanted to have his own shine and kept his distance so as not to be buried beneath hers. That was the conclusion she reached. A conclusion that makes me think this girl doesn't have two functioning neurons in her head. Our protagonist was left dumbfounded by such nonsense as she continued her little act, saying that until now she hadn't understood him. She couldn't believe she hadn't realized it, considering they had been friends since childhood. She explained that she came to understand it thanks to a conversation with Sakura and her grandfather, and that was why she had devised that system. After saying this, she reached into her pocket and took out one of the gold badges. She offered it to him, commenting that he could use it because she had saved it for him, so he could be among the highest-ranking students. She insisted that he take it, but at that moment, he looked at her with disdain, brushed her hand aside, and threw the badge to the ground, completely rejecting it. She, surprised, watched it fall and asked him in confusion what he was doing and why he was rejecting it like that. He replied that apparently she didn't understand that all he wanted was to live a normal life. He didn't want some absurd badge to join any higher rank. He didn't want her stupid badge. At this, completely bewildered, she asked what that was supposed to mean. Agitated, she questioned why he was doing this when she had gone through all that trouble to implement that system just for him. Even humiliating herself for the first time in her life, she added angrily that if that was how it was going to be, she would make sure he wouldn't receive a gold badge, not even a silver one, turning him into the only person in the school without any badge at all. The protagonist walked past her without showing the slightest interest and replied that he didn't care, that it was fine, and that she could do whatever she wanted. Annoyed, she called him an idiot and said it was impossible to reason with him, something that surprised me to hear coming from her. Ryua, for her part, shouted at him not to come crying to her later in regret. 2 weeks after this conversation, while they were eating together, Amain told the protagonist with concern that lately things at school felt strange. He replied that he had noticed it too. The girl explained that students with badges were receiving preferential treatment. Lower-ranked students were giving up their seats and the best spots to them. And if a teacher found one of them sleeping, they wouldn't reprimand them. It was clear that favoritism and the status gap between scholarship students and regular students had gotten worse than before. At this, the protagonist commented that it was all due to that badge system, just as he had feared. The girl asked what he meant, and he asked her if she had ever heard of the Stanford prison experiment. She said no, so he explained. This experiment was a psychology study in which a group of people was randomly divided into two roles, prisoners and guards, inside a simulated prison to observe their behavior. Even though they were all ordinary people, the guards began to become authoritarian and abusive, while the prisoners became submissive, anxious, and stressed. What was most surprising was that this change occurred in just a few days. The experiment had to be stopped earlier than planned because the situation became too intense and began to emotionally affect the participants. It became so dangerous that, according to reports, the guards wanted it to continue, which suggested they had become addicted to the experience and to mistreating the prisoners. Upon hearing this story, the girl grew alarmed and asked in horror, thinking that something like that could also happen at the school. The protagonist replied that it wouldn't be exactly the same, although the feeling was quite similar. Before, the students had been divided between scholarship and irregular students. Those in charge were the scholarship students. The division was barely noticeable, but the implementation of that system made it obvious. The girl showed a worried expression after hearing the story, and the protagonist, seeing what he had caused, tried to ease the situation. The protagonist continued, saying that there was something else about the experiment. Years later, it was discovered that the professor in charge had also acted as the warden and had given instructions to the guards to treat the prisoners that way. With a smile, he told the girl that, in short, without pressure from above, things would not go that far. This comment calmed her a little. She said that was a good thing, while the protagonist remained silent, omitting the fact that if, this time, someone in authority ordered oppression, everything could end up the same way. He did not mention it so as not to frighten her. At that moment, the protagonist changed the subject and asked her why she was not wearing a badge if she was a scholarship student. He added that if she was doing it out of consideration for him, something he did not have, she should not bother, since those things did not concern him. She replied that it was not because of that, and, somewhat uncomfortable, confessed that there had been a mix-up with the distribution, and that she had not yet received one. Upon hearing this, the protagonist felt anger rising from deep within. He was not so foolish as to fail to realize that this was most likely caused as revenge by that pig because he had refused the badge. With this in mind, he apologized to the girl, commenting that it was probably his fault that she had not received it. Immediately afterward, he stood up and said that he would go talk to that pig right away. Amain stopped him, urging him not to do it. The protagonist insisted that she should use it, but she firmly told him that she would not, no matter what. This surprised the protagonist, who asked her why. With a smile, she explained that if she did, she would not be able to be paired with him. She added that those things did not matter to her. He knew very well that she had always been alone, and that now what mattered most to her was something else, spending as much time as possible with him. For her, that was far more meaningful, because he had been her savior, the one who pulled her out of that place of darkness. As she spoke, her voice grew softer, almost a whisper, and she moved closer to the protagonist, who, surprised, could only utter her name. Amain continued to move closer, clearly blushing, until their lips were almost touching. But at that very moment, a notification sound rang out, startling and embarrassing her. She apologized to the protagonist before noticing that she had received a message. She added that it was from the baseball club, which struck the protagonist as strange, since she had no connection to sports. She explained that they had forced her to give them her contact information earlier, and she had not been able to refuse. She looked at the message and told the protagonist that they were asking her to meet after school to talk about something, although she did not know what it was about. Upon hearing this, the protagonist thought that the leader of the baseball club was that arrogant Asano, who apparently liked Amain and perhaps just wanted to confess his feelings or something like that. At that moment, the girl interrupted him and asked if, after she went to see what they wanted, they could go home together. She added that lately she had not been able to spend time with him, and that now was a good opportunity since she was free. The protagonist nodded, saying it would be a pleasure for him, and added that he also had the rest of the day free from his part-time job. Thus, they agreed to meet at 4 p.m. that same day. In this way, the day went on until the time arrived. Even 10 more minutes had passed. The protagonist found it strange that the girl had not arrived before him at the entrance, since she was usually very punctual when they arranged to meet. Her motto as a seiyuu was that a lack of punctuality undermined credibility, so she had never been late to meet him before. He figured that the boy's confession had probably dragged on. Maybe he was hesitating or something like that. Even so, he thought that just in case, he should prepare something. At that moment, he wrote a text message on his phone. Meanwhile, inside the school, a female voice shouted for them to stop. And as expected, it was Amain, telling the boys surrounding her that she needed to go home. In response, Asano, with a sinister smile, placed a hand on her shoulder and told her they were not finished talking yet. He added that it was not a bad deal and urged her to listen and do what they were asking. The girl refused, and on the verge of tears, she pleaded for the protagonist to help her. Meanwhile, in the student council room, the president made sure to close the curtains and lock the door before changing clothes, as she would not let what happened last time happen again. Just as she said this, a notification sound announced a message on her laptop. It was a message in the student council inbox. When she saw that it was from Suzuki Kasuma, our protagonist, she looked at the message with suspicion and wondered what exactly that boy was trying to do.
Back to Amain, we see that she starts screaming that she doesn't want what's about to be done to her and tries to ask the protagonist for help. Right at that moment, something makes a noise and everyone stops to see what's happening. Kazuma has just arrived and orders the guys to take their filthy hands off her right now, showing us how he's willing to fight to defend her no matter the cost. The scene pauses for a second, and while everyone processes what just happened, Amane feels relieved to see that her hero has arrived to save her, practically crying from relief. Meanwhile, one of the guys complains about how the protagonist is once again getting in his way. Meanwhile, start mocking him and throw it in his face that he should know his place, since he doesn't have a badge, and they try to intimidate him, insulting him and calling him all sorts of names. However, Kazuma doesn't react to their attempts to scare him, looking at them as if he doesn't care, because that's truly how he feels. At that moment, Kazuma calls out to Asano, the leader of the group, asking him what happened with his club activities, questioning whether it's not bad for a student like him to skip practice in an attempt to push him to his limit and make him nervous. Asano starts to lose his patience, but the protagonist keeps talking, realizing that he only skipped club activities just to come and flirt with a girl. Because of this, he starts to hint that he could go and tell the baseball team everything, and as a result, they might revoke his golden badge. But things don't end there. Kazuma even points out that he brought along two very strong guys to help him in his attempt to flirt with Amane, and finally gives him a pitying smile, mentioning that it's rather cowardly of him to go to such lengths just to force a girl to do something she doesn't want to do. This finally pushes Asano over the edge, and in a fit of rage he hits Amane, who screams and falls to the ground, while he tries to start a fight with the protagonist. Kazuma, for his part, reacts instantly and runs over, managing to arrive just in time to catch Amane before she falls, carrying her in his arms like a princess. After this, he tells his rival that, luckily, he is very easy to provoke, regaining his indifferent expression, allowing us to understand that it was all part of his plan to keep his friend safe. Once the teasing is over, he helps Amane to her feet and asks if she's okay, to which she replies, yes, becoming entranced as she looks at him. Such a scene annoys Asano even more, who starts complaining to the protagonist, saying that someone without a badge like him has no right to interfere in his affairs, and insists that he was only offering Amane a good deal. The protagonist questions this skeptically, having an idea of what he means. Asano then reveals that he promised Amane that if they went out together, he would give her a golden badge as a special exception. He also explains that being someone without badges can cause a lot of problems at school. And not satisfied with that, he accuses the protagonist of being the reason she's in that situation, to which Kazuma can't say anything since he knows it might be true. Amane tries to deny it, but Kazuma steps in and asks that if that's true, then what will he do? He continues arguing that Amane was crying out of fear because she hated this situation, and that's why she shouldn't be forced. He then questions Asano if he really has the authority to hand out badges so easily. This makes him nervous and he starts to doubt himself, since he doesn't know if he really can or if it goes against the rules. Kazuma starts connecting the dots and realizes that it was Rua who was responsible for this, and that she ordered the boys to try to separate him and Amane somehow, which ended up with them cornering her in the classroom and forcing her to do something she didn't want to do. The boys, once they realize they've been found out, get nervous, but they're even angrier about how the protagonist is calling Rua a pig. Since they idolize her like a celebrity, they can't allow him to keep talking about her that way. However, the protagonist doesn't back down from his insults, since no one more twisted than her would be capable of giving orders to people like them, despising them all equally. This is the last straw for one of the boys, who starts getting ready to fight, complaining that he's not going to listen to someone without any badges like him anymore, especially not when he insults his beloved Rua. Kazuma gets into fight mode, but before they start, he asks him if he's sure about what he's going to do, since he knows he's part of the judo club and if he uses his skills violently against someone else, his whole team will be in trouble. The guy smiles and says he doesn't care about that. He starts mocking him and mentions that he already knows about the incident caused by his seniors last year, but the school covered it all up. That's because the baseball and judo clubs are the ones who run the school, and so the school is very cooperative in covering up their misdeeds, so they won't mind doing it again. Moreover, since he doesn't have any badge, they won't have any trouble dealing with him, which really scares Amane, since students like them would never be supported by others. As the boy charges into the fight, assuring her that she'll regret messing with them, Amane shrinks back in fear, until suddenly, the protagonist lifts her up like a princess again, and apologizes, but what he's about to do will only take a moment. Thus Kazuma nimbly dodges the boy's move, who is surprised to see how he did it, but then demands to his face that he not run away and face him like a man. With little effort, the protagonist begins to dodge the attacks, not only from the boy, but from all the bullies, while holding Amane in his arms, who can only watch in confusion at what is happening. While she grows nervous about the situation, which is both embarrassing and dangerous, Kazuma apologizes since he needs to buy them some time until someone arrives, and we see that it doesn't take long, as President Kochu appears just in time to stop them, making everyone nervous. The president glares at the group of bullies, pointing out that fighting in a place like this is a serious offense against the school's rules, and they'd better have a good explanation, or they'll be in trouble. Asano and the others try to make excuses, but they don't know what to say. Kazuma, for his part, assures her that it's nothing serious, surprising the president. He then tells her how everything happened, revealing that the boys were rejected by Amane and, as a result, lost control, while he only tried to reason with them to calm them down. Kochu looks at him doubtfully. After this, she mentions that she is very disappointed in them, as she didn't expect them to act this way just because they were rejected. The bullies don't hesitate and go along with it, apologizing for what they just did as if it were nothing. However, Kochu doesn't stop there, as she reminds them that they can't keep acting like this, since their clubs have important matches coming up soon, so she advises them to stop wasting time and go practice. In response, the three of them agree. As the group leaves, Kazuma confirms his suspicion that they are weak in the face of authority. After all, those who grow up in this kind of environment and become arrogant end up being obedient to someone with greater power, like the president in this case. After this, Kazuma thanks the president for saving him, but when she looks at him for a moment, she approaches and shows him the email she received, asking if it was from him, and we see that it mentions something about a black butterfly. When he reads it, Kazuma understands perfectly what it refers to, recalling a certain event in which he saw something in the president that he shouldn't have. Blushing, the president clarifies that he is the only one who knows what black butterfly means to her, so she immediately made the connection. Kazuma apologizes, explaining that he thought mentioning that would be the best way to get her attention, so she would help him, especially in such a critical situation. She gets upset and then embarrassed, since she thought he called her to a private place to do something inappropriate, although she doesn't seem entirely against the idea. The protagonist tries to ask what she means, but she quickly changes the subject so her thoughts aren't noticed as she looks at both of them directly. Then, she points out that being so close together is a violation of the school's morals. Once again, the protagonist apologizes, but excuses himself by saying that Amane was very scared during the fight and he didn't know how else to react. The president understands that there was no other way, so she lets it go. Kazuma, for his part, mentions that the problem comes from the badge system, since it causes some students to think they're superior to others, and that's why the student council should create an alternative as soon as possible. Kochu remains silent at such an idea, and after that, she leaves the scene, ordering them to do the same and go home. At that moment, Kazuma tries to get Amane to separate from him, but then he notices that she's trembling. Because of this, he apologizes, since she had to go through all of this because of him. She starts to cry and explains that it's not his fault, since she chose not to have any badges on her own. Even so, she can't stop trembling, because being surrounded by men scared her a lot, so she asks Kazuma to overwrite this experience with his presence, meaning not just to stay with her, but for her to really be able to feel him by her side. This takes the protagonist by surprise, and then Amane starts to get closer to him, asking him to fill her mind with nothing but memories of him, looking at him with eyes full of love. After this, they finally kiss, and Kazuma lets her continue, not stopping until she feels better, staying in each other's arms for quite a while. After a while, when they can't go on any longer, they separate, and Amane thanks the protagonist for having helped her, assuring him with a smile that the overwriting is complete, and, therefore, she will never forget the kiss they just shared.